The morning sun filtered through the gauzy curtains of Sunflower Home, casting warm golden light onto the worn wooden floors. Outside, maple leaves drifted lazily in the breeze, painting the yard in hues of amber and rust. The house, with its faded yellow paint and creaky porch swing, looked old but loved like an aging grandmother whose stories still warmed your heart. Inside, the air smelled faintly of oatmeal and lavender. Children's voices echoed from the dining hall, accompanied by the soft clatter of spoons against bowls. Lily Montgomery sat quietly by the window in the east wing, her small fingers tracing the path of a raindrop sliding down the glass. Her wheelchair was angled just right so she could watch the younger kids playing in the yard. Her chestnut hair was pulled into two uneven braids, her own handiwork, and her deep blue eyes were locked onto something far beyond the garden wall. She didn't speak, but her gaze carried weight, as if searching for something she couldn't quite name. "Lily, sweetheart," came a familiar voice, gentle but firm. "It's time for breakfast." Mrs. Harrison stepped into the room, her soft-soled shoes making almost no sound against the floor. She was a woman shaped by decades of care. Smile lines creased the corners of her eyes, and her voice held the kind of steadiness that made children believe everything might be okay, even when it wasn't. Lily turned her chair with a practiced ease, the worn wheels squeaking slightly as she spun. "Coming, Mrs. Harrison," she replied, her voice bright despite the heaviness she felt in her chest. Today wasn't like other days. Today held a silence inside her, one that had nothing to do with the rain or the way the sky looked bruised with clouds. It was her Mother's Day. In the dining hall, the noise was familiar chaos. 20 kids, each with their own invisible scars, chattered and laughed and clumsily passed dishes down the long wooden tables. But even in that noise, Lily stood out. Not because of her wheelchair, most of the kids had long stopped noticing that, but because of the way she always seemed to notice everyone else. She wiped oatmeal off a younger girl's chin, handed a dropped spoon back to a boy with tears in his eyes, and offered quiet reassurances to anyone having a hard morning. She didn't do it to be noticed. She did it because something inside her refused to let others feel alone. Mrs. Harrison watched her from the serving counter, a quiet tenderness in her eyes. When most of the kids had wandered off to the playroom or schoolroom, she walked over and sat beside Lily, placing a gentle hand on the girl's small shoulder. "Today is a special day," she said. Lily nodded without looking up. "It's the day she died." Mrs. Harrison took a moment. "Yes, it is, and you've grown so much this year. You've been so brave. I think you're ready for something important." Lily turned to her, curiosity piercing the sadness in her eyes. "I thought we might visit her today," Mrs. Harrison said softly. "Your mother's grave. We can put flowers down, talk to her." For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Lily's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever offered before. For 9 years, her mother had existed only in whispers, in a crumpled photograph, and in the ache behind her ribs when she looked in the mirror and saw those same blue eyes. "Really?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Really?" Mrs. Harrison smiled. "Just the two of us, this afternoon." Lily blinked back sudden tears and nodded. She didn't know why the idea of a gravestone made her heart race. Maybe it was because it would finally prove her mother had existed, not just as a picture, not just as a story, as someone real. As she wheeled herself slowly back to her room, her heart was louder than her thoughts. She felt something stirring. Inside, hope, fear, longing. She didn't know it yet. But this quiet autumn morning was the beginning of everything she thought she'd never have. The sky darkened as the clock struck 3, clouds curling low like smoke in the sky, as if the day itself was preparing for something sacred. Lily sat at the edge of the porch, bundled in her navy coat, her knees wrapped in a flannel blanket, her hands clutching a small bouquet of sunflowers, the kind her mother supposedly loved. The flowers looked like hope wrapped in yellow, but her fingers trembled around their stems. She didn't know what to expect. A headstone, silence, answers, or more questions. Mrs. Harrison stood behind her, holding a folded umbrella and glancing occasionally toward the road. "He should be here any minute," she said, referring to the man she'd hired to take them. "He's an old friend. He owes me a favor." Lily didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on the driveway. Though her mind wandered, she imagined what her mother's voice might have sounded like, soft like Mrs. Harrison's, or perhaps full of laughter, like Maria's from the nursery wing. Sometimes she dreamed of her, a faceless woman in a yellow dress, standing at the edge of a sunflower field, always reaching for her, but never quite close enough. The quiet crunch of gravel snapped her back to reality. A long, weathered bus creaked its way into the drive, its faded paint chipped by time and sun. It was the kind of bus that looked like it carried more stories than passengers. The brakes hissed as it stopped, and the engine coughed into silence. The door opened with a metallic groan, and then he stepped out. The man wore a dark brown jacket, frayed at the elbows, and a flat cap pulled low over his brow. He was tall and lean, his movements slow but deliberate. His eyes, shaded by the brim of his cap, scanned the porch and lingered just for a second along on Lily. She noticed. Mrs. Harrison smiled politely. "Thomas, thank you again." "Of course," he said, voice low and gravelly, like a man who didn't speak often or didn't want to. He glanced at Lily again, and something in his expression shifted. He nodded toward her, more of a twitch than a greeting. Lily stared back, puzzled. There was something in his eyes, not pity, something older, something heavier. The ramp was lowered, and Lily rolled up with practiced grace. But even as Thomas secured her chair and helped them aboard, she could feel his gaze brush her like a whisper in the dark. Noticing, studying. The engine groaned to life, and the bus rolled forward. They passed rows of houses, fields of drying corn, and fences half swallowed by weeds. The town looked older today, the roads lonelier, as if the world itself were holding its breath. "You all right back there?" Thomas asked, glancing at Lily in the mirror. She hesitated. "I think so. Just nervous." He gave a short nod. "I know what that's like." Something in his voice made her turn. The way he said it, it wasn't empty kindness. It was lived in, like he knew the weight of nervousness that clung to her chest. "You ever lost someone?" she asked suddenly. Thomas blinked. The question seemed to hit him somewhere deeper than expected. His fingers tightened on the wheel, the veins in his hands like branches under snow. "Yeah," he said, "a long time ago." Mrs. Harrison shot him a quick glance from her seat beside Lily. Something passed between the two adults, silent, tense. Lily saw it. She filed it away. The rest of the ride was quiet, save for the occasional bump in the road. Every few minutes, Thomas's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, not to check the road, but to watch her. They reached the cemetery just as a thin drizzle began to fall. It wasn't enough to drench the ground, but enough to make the air smell like earth and memory. Thomas stepped off the bus first and opened the door. Then he unlatched the ramp and gently rolled Lily down. He didn't speak as he helped adjust her blanket or tuck the bouquet under her arm. But there was a quietness about him now that wasn't the same as before, like he was bracing himself for something she couldn't see. As they walked deeper into the cemetery, rows of names blurred past her eyes, people she'd never know, stories that had long ended. But then they stopped. There was a modest gray headstone, simple, clean. Her mother's name carved in graceful letters, Sarah Montgomery, 1989 to 2016. Beloved, missed, never forgotten. Lily's breath caught. Her heart pounded like it wanted to climb out of her chest. She reached out and ran her fingertips over the name, half afraid it would disappear. "She was beautiful," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "Wasn't she?" Thomas was standing a few steps away, hands in his jacket pockets, rain soaking the shoulders of his coat. "Yes," he said softly. "She was." This time, Mrs. Harrison turned sharply to look at him, but Lily didn't notice. "I always wondered," Lily said, speaking to the stone. "Did she name me before she died? Did she hold me? Was she scared?" Thomas closed his eyes for a beat, as if the weight of those questions had reached inside him and twisted something he thought he'd buried. "She loved you," he said, the words leaving his mouth like a confession. More than anything, Lily slowly turned toward him. "You knew her?" His answer was a whisper. "Yes." The wind blew, scattering leaves across the path behind them. The silence that followed was heavier than anything Lily had ever known, and then the smallest detail made her freeze. There, tucked against the side of the gravestone, fresh flowers. Not from them, not arranged by cemetery staff. Lilies and sunflowers, just like the ones she brought. They weren't wilted. Someone had been here recently. Lily's hands tightened on her wheels. "Who else visits her?" she asked, barely breathing. Thomas didn't answer. Not yet. But the truth was beginning to rise slow, unstoppable, and rooted in a past no one had dared speak of. And Lily could feel it. Something was coming. Something real. She just didn't know yet how close it was, or how her whole world was about to change forever. The sky had turned the color of slate as Lily stared at the flowers, lying beside her mother's grave, fresh, delicate, and too recently placed to be coincidence. She didn't speak, but her mind roared with questions. Who had brought them? Who knew her mother enough to leave lilies and sunflowers her flowers? Mrs. Harrison bent down to brush some fallen leaves from the base of the headstone. Maybe a friend from the old days, she offered casually, but there was a small crack in her voice that didn't go unnoticed. Lily heard it. She looked from the grave to the man standing behind her, silent as a statue. Thomas. He hadn't said a word since whispering, "Yes, I knew her." Now he kept his eyes on the ground, the tip of his boot nervously pressing into the gravel. She studied him, how tightly he held his hands in his pockets, the way his jaw clenched and released, like something inside him was trying to claw its way out. She gripped the wheels of her chair and slowly turned to face him. "How did you know her?" Mrs. Harrison straightened quickly. "Lily, maybe we should." "No," Lily said, her voice steadier than she felt. He said he knew her. Thomas looked up. Their eyes met, hers, wide and searching, his, shadowed and tired. "I knew her when we were young," he finally said, his voice low. "Back before she came here. We were close." Close. The word hung in the air like a secret half-spoken. "She never told me about you," Lily said. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked over to the grave, knelt beside it, and touched the name carved in stone with a reverence. That startled her. She used to sing to the moon, he murmured. She'd hum these little songs, half melodies, mostly made up, said it helped her sleep. Lily felt a jolt in her chest. "I do that too." "I know," Thomas said, not looking at her. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Mrs. Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "Lily, maybe it's time we head back." "No," Lily said again, firmer this time. Her heart was racing, but her voice was steady. "You said you knew her. You brought the flowers. You said you knew about the songs. So what else? What else aren't you saying?" Thomas stood slowly, brushing the rain from his sleeves. "I didn't come here to hurt you." "Then tell me," Lily whispered. "Tell me the truth." The wind carried her words away, and for a moment, it felt as if even the trees had gone. Silent. Thomas looked down, as if searching for the right words on the gravestone itself. Finally, he pulled something from his coat pocket, a photograph, creased, aged, and well-loved. Lily reached for it with trembling hands. Her breath hitched. It was a picture of her mother, younger, smiling, her arms wrapped around Amanda, younger, Thomas, and in her arms, a newborn baby swaddled in blue and white. The baby had a hospital bracelet on. Lily could just make out the faint letters written in ink. Montgomery, L. Her heart stopped. Everything around her, the wind, the trees, the grave fell away. Just her, and the truth staring back from a faded photograph. "That's me," she whispered. Thomas finally spoke. "I didn't know about you, Lily, not until it was too late. By the time I found out Sarah had died, they told me the baby you had been stillborn. That was the word they used. Gone. I didn't even know she'd had a child." Mrs. Harrison stepped forward, voice urgent. "Thomas, no," he said, eyes locked on Lily. "She deserves to know." Lily clutched the photo to her chest, tears stinging her eyes. She wanted to speak, to scream, to understand, but the words wouldn't come. Her breath came in short bursts. Her mind raced through the lonely nights, the unanswered prayers, the questions whispered into darkness. "You were out there," she thought. "You were out there this whole time." "I searched," Thomas continued. "Once I found out, I looked everywhere. I didn't stop until I found your name on an old registry tied to Sunflower Home. But when I called," he looked at Mrs. Harrison. Mrs. Harrison's face was pale. "I didn't know who you were. I didn't want to let just anyone come barging into her life." Lily's voice cracked. "But he's not just anyone. I didn't know that then," she said. "All I knew was that Lily was safe, and I wasn't going to risk breaking her heart." "Too late," Lily whispered, voice raw. She turned her chair away, rolling slowly back toward the path. The gravel crunched beneath her wheels, sounding louder than thunder in the stillness. Her thoughts spun memories, lies, faces she trusted. She didn't look back. Thomas started forward, but stopped himself. He let her go, not because he wanted to, but because he finally understood what it meant to be too late. She reached the bus and stopped beside it. The air smelled like rain and secrets. She rested her head against the cold metal door, trying to breathe. A minute later, Mrs. Harrison approached quietly. Lily didn't lift her head. "Was it true?" she asked, voice small. "Did you know he was my dad?" Mrs. Harrison's silence was answer enough. Lily closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like the little girl she tried so hard not to be alone. Unchosn. But this time, not forgotten. And somewhere, in the depths of her storming heart, a seed of something else was beginning to grow. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the ache of possibility. And in that ache, a quiet voice whispered, "What if it's not too late after all?" The rain had stopped by the time they returned to Sunflower Home, but the clouds stayed, heavy and unmoving, like the weight pressing down on Lily's chest. The gravel path crunched beneath the wheels of her chair as she moved without speaking, the photograph now folded and clenched tightly in her hand. She didn't look at Mrs. Harrison, and she certainly didn't look at Thomas. He had offered to push her chair, his voice tight and low, "Please, let me." But Lily had refused with a sharp shake of her head, her jaw set, tears brimming. But unshed. Inside the orphanage, the other children greeted her with cheerful noise, unaware that the world had cracked beneath her. But for the first time, she didn't smile. She nodded numbly, whispered something about being tired, and wheeled herself straight to her room. She didn't cry. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat by the window again, just like she had that morning, watching the gray sky blur against the glass. Her thumb rubbed the edge of the photo until the paper softened beneath her touch. There they were, her mother, her father, and her, tiny and wrapped in a hospital blanket, stillborn. That's what they'd said. A lie big enough to steal a life. Why? Who had told that lie? Who had kept her hidden? And why did no one think she deserved the truth? A soft knock came at the door. Lily didn't move. It opened slowly. "Can I come in?" Thomas's voice was gravel and regret. Lily didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the glass. He stepped in anyway, slow and unsure, like a man walking across ice he knew might break. He pulled a wooden chair across the room and sat beside her, but not too close. Silence stretched between them like a chasm. "I don't know how to be here," he said eventually. "I don't know how to be a father to someone who's already had to grow up without one." Lily's voice was small, sharp. "Then why are you here?" Thomas looked at his hands. They were shaking. "Because I have to try. Because I don't know how to keep living with the guilt. Because I lost your mother. And then I lost you, and now that I found you, I can't walk away." She turned to him then, her eyes red but fierce. "You didn't lose me. You left. You weren't there when I was learning to hold a spoon. You weren't there when I got my chair. You weren't there when I cried for a face I didn't even know I was missing. I didn't know. You should have," she snapped. "You should have looked harder." He flinched like she'd hit him. "I know." Silence again. He reached into his coat pocket and took out something else, another photo. This one, more recent. A tiny box of trinkets. A crumpled drawing. A hospital bracelet. A child's music box. "I carried this with me," he said, voice tight. "Not because I had proof, but because I hoped you were out there. Because hope was all I had left." Lily stared at the box. It wasn't big, but it was full of years he never got to spend with her, and it made her throat close up. "Why did they say I was dead?" she asked. "Who told that lie?" Thomas hesitated. "That's what I've been trying to find out." Her brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he leaned forward, eyes darker now. "I don't think your mother died the way they said either." Lily blinked. "What?" "I've been digging. After they told me she'd passed, something didn't sit right. The hospital records were sealed. Her file was flagged. There were names missing from the birth certificate, even yours." Lily's heart began to race. "You think someone did it on purpose?" "I don't know," Thomas admitted, "but someone went to a lot of trouble to erase the truth. And now I think," he paused, glanced toward the door as if checking they were alone. "I think Sarah knew. I think she was trying to protect you." Lily's breath caught. Mrs. Harrison had always said Sarah died giving birth. But what if that wasn't true? What if she had been running, hiding? From who? Lily looked back at the photograph, then at the man sitting beside her. He wasn't perfect. He was bruised by grief, frayed by time, and clumsy with love. But something in his voice, the way it cracked when he said her name, the way he never once tried to take her pain away, only sit with it, felt like something she'd never had before. "Truth. I don't forgive you," she said. Thomas nodded. I don't expect you to. She looked at him for a long moment. But I want to know more. And with that, something shifted. Not quite trust, not quite peace, but a step forward. Outside, the clouds began to move, revealing a sliver of fading orange light. It wasn't morning, but it wasn't night either. It was the space in between, the place where new stories begin, and somewhere, buried beneath years of silence and scars, a secret waited to rise. Sarah Montgomery hadn't died in peace, and Lily was done living in the shadows of someone else's lie. It started with a box. Thomas brought it the next morning, tucked under his arm like something fragile and holy. The wood was old, stained, and scratched on the corners. Nothing special to look at, but Lily knew it mattered by the way he held it, like it could shatter. He placed it on her lap gently, not saying a word, just nodded, and waited. Lily hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside, everything smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. There were scraps of photographs, some torn, some whole, a hospital ID tag with the name Sarah, and a music box that no longer played, but still held the imprint of tiny fingerprints on its side. There were letters too, dozens of them, unsent, unfinished, some with just a single line. If you ever find her, she had your eyes. I'm sorry I wasn't there. Lily touched each item like it was made of glass. Where did you get these? She whispered. Most of it came from her old apartment, Thomas said. After she died, her belongings were boxed up and forgotten. I found a woman, Margot, who used to live next door. She said Sarah was always afraid, always looking over her shoulder. Lily looked up. Afraid of who? Thomas's jaw tightened. That's what we're going to find out. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a brittle hospital discharge summary. The top read, St. Margaret's Medical Center, 2016 date of birth, female infant, unknown name, status, transferred, unauthorized. Lily stared at the last word. Unauthorized. Double quotes, transferred? She asked. Where? They don't say, Thomas replied, but this document was never meant to be seen. It was hidden in a file buried beneath insurance records. Someone didn't want it found. Lily's heart pounded. Why? Why would someone transfer me without saying anything? Without my mother's permission? Thomas's voice darkened. Because I don't think Sarah died in childbirth. I think someone made her disappear. The words hit Lily like a slap. The narrative of her entire life, mother dead at birth, father never around, placed in care for safety, was crumbling. Thomas opened a folded piece of paper and slid it across the table. It was a list typed neatly, clinical. At the top, it read, Closed infant custody transfers. St. Margaret's Division D. Beside the names were dates and initials of officers involved. There were dozens, and one entry stood out. Montgomery, S. Infant. Female, May 6, 2016. Custody handoff. Internal clearance, only internal clearance, Thomas said. Means someone inside the hospital gave the order. No legal documentation. No signatures. No mother's consent. Lily's hands trembled. So they took me. Yes. And they lied about her. He nodded. They wanted both of you gone. Her silenced. You, forgotten. A heavy silence fell between them. Outside, the wind howled through the autumn trees, shaking the window panes. The world felt darker now, heavier, like it knew secrets were finally being pulled from the ground. What was she running from? Lily asked softly. Thomas was quiet. She never told me, he said. But near the end, she'd leave voicemails at 2 in the morning. Half the time, she didn't say anything, just breathing, sometimes crying. Once she said a name. I couldn't make it out, but I remember how scared she sounded. Lily stared at the box. What if it wasn't just the hospital? She said. What if someone else made it happen? Thomas looked at her then, not like a child, but like a partner in something far bigger. That's what I'm afraid of. Lily's breath was shallow now. Her hands gripped the armrest of her chair. Then, we need to find out. Thomas nodded slowly. They started with the hospital. That afternoon, Thomas pulled his truck around back, and Lily climbed it with help, her mind sharp, heart racing. He called ahead, posing as a journalist researching infant wellness programs. He knew they wouldn't let a stranger dig into sealed records without a reason, so they would have to make one. St. Margaret stood like a forgotten sentinel at the edge of the city hall. Cracked walls, flickering hallway lights, and an elevator that groaned with every floor. Inside, everything smelled like bleach and old paper. At the front desk, a nurse in tire scrubs looked up. Help you. Thomas smiled politely. My niece was born here. We're trying to get some records for a family project. Any way we can check old delivery logs? The nurse blinked. What year? 2016. Her eyes narrowed. That's classified. Records from before the merger were sealed. You'll need legal access. Thomas nodded, pretending to understand. But Lily saw at the flicker in the nurse's expression. She knew something odd as they left the front desk. Lily wheeled herself toward the hallway, her eyes scanning door after door until she saw one marked Medical Archives, authorized on list. Paused, then glanced at Thomas. A decision passed silently between them. They weren't going to knock, because whoever had buried the truth wasn't going to hand it over. They would have to take it. The hallway leading to the archives was silent, save for the distant beep of monitors and the rhythmic squeak of Lily's wheels. On the linoleum floor, Thomas walked beside her, tense, scanning the corners with the quiet calculation of someone who knew how quickly things could turn. The door ahead was steel, institutional gray, with a keypad lock that blinked red in warning. Thomas took a breath. This is where it gets illegal. Lily didn't hesitate. So did taking me. He almost smiled, but her eyes were fierce, steady. There was no child in that gaze anymore, only a daughter chasing justice. He pulled a keycard from his coat, one he'd swiped from the nurse's cart when she wasn't looking. A long shot, but a risk worth taking. He swiped. Beep. The light turned green. Thomas blinked. Well, that's concerning. They stepped into the archives like intruders in a tomb. Rows upon rows of filing cabinets lined the room, dimly lit by flickering fluorescence. The air smelled like mildew, old paper, and something sterile. Forgotten. Look for 2016. May. Thomas whispered. Lily wheeled herself toward the shelves marked "Op Delivery." Her fingers moved fast despite their trembling. Drawer after drawer creaked open. Then she found it. Montgomery, Sarah. She pulled out a manila file. Inside, a black and white scan of a baby, her. And then, attached with a paper clip, a photo of Sarah holding her, sweaty, tired, but smiling, fiercely protective. Not the photo of a woman who died during childbirth. She was alive. Lily breathed. They lied. Thomas looked over her shoulder. Keep going. There were signed release forms. Except they weren't Sarah's signature. They were forged sloppily. The ink bled in odd places, and the strokes were different from the sample signature on her ID. And at the bottom, scribbled in the margins in faint pencil, transfer authorized. Dr. E. Lang, internal risk protocol D4 alpha. Thomas. Still. Lang. You know him. He was head of pediatrics until 2019. Left suddenly. Disappeared. Some said it was financial misconduct. Others said it was something darker. A sudden noise cut through the room. A click from the far end. The door. Lily froze. Did someone follow us? Thomas grabbed the file, shoving it into his coat. We have to move. Now, the exit to the archives was no longer safe. They took a side route, a maintenance stairwell rusted and cold. Thomas half-carried Lily when her wheelchair couldn't handle the steps. By the time they reached the parking lot, both were breathless. Back in the truck, they sat in silence, headlights off. Thomas gripped the wheel hard. They stole you, he finally said. Not because of a clerical error. Not even out of cruelty. It was deliberate. You were part of a program. Lily turned to him, her voice quiet. What kind of program? He pulled out his phone, scrolling through the photos he'd snapped of the files. D4 Alpha. He said, I've heard that name before. It's not medical. It's government. Lily went still. Thomas continued. Sarah may have uncovered something, some experiment, or trafficking ring, or secret study, whatever it was. She tried to escape, and they covered it up by faking her death. They placed you in a home they could monitor. A lump rose in Lily's throat. Then what about Mrs. Harrison? Thomas paused. She's either innocent or part of it. Lily turned toward the window, the city blurring by. Her entire world had been a lie. Her mother hadn't died giving birth. Her father hadn't abandoned her. And the home she trusted had likely been a cage with wallpapered walls and warm smiles. They reached his apartment an hour later. Thomas lived above an old bookstore, cluttered but quiet. Safe. Inside, Lily opened the file again, scanning every word, every stamp. Her fingers traced the corners of the photograph of her mother holding her. Then something fell. From between the pages, a postcard dot. It was addressed to no one. The handwriting was Sarah's. If you're reading this, then I failed to protect you. But someone is still looking for you. Someone dangerous. I named you Lily because you were the only good thing I ever grew. Don't trust anyone until you know their truth, especially the one who's always smiling. Lily's hand trembled. Thomas looked over her shoulder dot and both of them whispered at the same time, Mrs. Harrison. The next morning, fog hung over the city like a veil. Lily sat by the apartment window, staring into the thick gray mist, Sarah's postcard clutched in her hands. Her mother's words echoed through her mind. Don't trust anyone until you know their truth, especially the one who's always smiling. That smile, the one that greeted her every morning, that promised warmth, that told her everything would be okay, even when it wasn't Mrs. Harrison's smile. Thomas had barely slept. He paced the room, file in hand, phone on speaker as he tried to reach anyone who could corroborate what they'd found. Everyone who might have helped had either been transferred, silenced, or unreachable. At 7:43 a.m., his phone buzzed. A message, no name, just a number, and a single sentence. She knows you took her. Lily wheeled up beside him. What does that mean? Before he could answer, someone knocked. 3 times, slow, deliberate. Thomas turned pale. He motioned for Lily to stay back and opened the door just an inch. Outside stood Mrs. Harrison, still in her sunflower yellow coat, still smiling. Thomas, she said sweetly, I think you have something that belongs to me. Behind her, 2 men in black suits stood silently, flanking the stairs like shadows with eyes. Thomas didn't answer. He simply shut the door and locked it. We need to go. Now. His voice dropped into a panic-laced whisper. They bolted out the back, down the fire escape. Lily's chair wasn't built for stairs, so Thomas lifted her effortlessly, adrenaline pumping through his veins. They jumped into the truck, the sound of shouting behind them now unmistakable. As Thomas turned the key, a black SUV pulled around the corner. No plates, just speed. He gunned it. The chase that followed ripped through side streets and alleys, until Thomas finally lost them in the underground parking garage of an abandoned mall. They sat in silence, breathless, headlights off, hearts pounding. Lily's voice broke the silence. I need to go back. Thomas turned, stunned. What? I need to look her in the eyes. I need to know why she did it. He shook his head. You don't owe her anything. I do. Because she raised me. Because I loved her. And if I don't face her now, I'll never be free. Thomas stared at her for a moment, then nodded. Sunflower Home sat in its usual quiet calm, as if the last 48 hours hadn't shattered the world. The golden paint glowed warm in the evening sun. Everything looked the same, but nothing was. Inside, Lily rolled into the lobby, alone. Mrs. Harrison was waiting in the reading room, sipping tea like any other Sunday evening. She didn't look surprised. Hello, dear, she said gently. You've been quite the explorer. Lily looked her dead in the eye. You lied. About my mother. You said she died giving birth. Mrs. Harrison sighed, setting the cup down. Because that's what you needed to believe. No, that's what you needed me to believe. Lily shot back, her voice steady. You worked with them, the ones who erased her, the ones who almost erased me. A pause, then Mrs. Harrison stood, smoothing her skirt. You're right, she said softly, and then her smile faded for the first time in Lily's memory. You were part of something bigger, Lily, something powerful and dangerous. Your mother didn't understand that. She tried to run. She tried to take you with her, but you were too valuable to let go. Tears welled in Lily's eyes, but not from sorrow, from rage. I'm not your experiment. No, Mrs. Harrison said, stepping forward, but you are ours. Behind her, a door creaked open. One of the men in suits appeared. He held a syringe, but then crack, the reading room window shattered. Thomas burst in, swinging a metal bar straight into the man's ribs. Chaos exploded. Lily grabbed the syringe and turned it on the second man before he could react, driving it into his thigh. He collapsed. Convulsing. Mrs. Harrison tried to run. Thomas caught her by the wrist. You ever look a child in the eyes and lie to her face? What does that do to a person? Mrs. Harrison's voice trembled for the first time. You don't understand what's at stake. I don't care. He snarled. You don't hurt children, ever. The police arrived minutes later, tipped off by an anonymous call Thomas had made before they entered. Lily gave them everything, the files, the postcard, the documents with Lang's name. It would take months to sort through the corruption, but the sunflower cover-up was over. Mrs. Harrison was arrested. The home would be placed under investigation. And Lily finally knew who she was. 3 weeks later, Lily stood before a fresh headstone. Sarah Montgomery, beloved mother, fighter, truth teller. Thomas stood beside her. You were right, Lily whispered. She never stopped protecting me. Thomas nodded. And now it's your turn to live. Lily smiled through her tears. I'm not just someone's daughter anymore, she said. I'm me, and I survived.